What it do, anime crew? Hey man, listen, today I'm going to be ranting about Season 2, Episode 19 of The Simpsons, Lisa's Substitute, per the request of Aesop on Patreon. If for whatever bizarre reason you want to request something on Patreon for me to rant about for $5 a month, I'll link it in the description below. But let's just get right into this. I don't have a tremendous amount to say. It was a really solid little episode. It follows Lisa Simpson as her teacher gets sick with Lyme disease, or at least what she thinks is Lyme disease, but she actually just got in her own head and self-diagnosed and ended up taking several days off of school because she was freaking out too much, which was kind of a little funny bit. Reminded me of Link's disease from This House Has People in It. You know, if you know, you know. Very, very, very reminiscent, actually, weirdly. So that was just something I picked up on. And they have to have a substitute. The substitute comes in with a pretty funny introduction where he's like, that's just my way of getting attention. Very, like, weird, eccentric, but, you know, charismatic and intelligent guy who's kind of the epitome of, like, a lot of people's positive experiences with substitute teachers and things of that nature. I know I had wasn't quite the same, but I had a professor when I briefly went to college who was also a fairly charismatic but eccentric and emotionally sensitive Semitic man who was conventionally attractive as well. But it's an experience that a lot of people have. And basically the story of the episode is that Lisa begins to take a fixation to him, an unhealthy fixation, pretty much. Like, she begins to develop a straight up like crush on this guy. Obviously, if you somehow don't know, Lisa's like freaking 10 or something. But thankfully, you know, the episode never gets like super dark and into like themes of like grooming or anything. But the point is, she has a really bad relationship with her father. Her father feels like he can't relate to her. He has trouble approaching her as compared to Bart because, you know, Homer sees himself as like this big dumb oaf because that's what he is. And I feel like he doesn't necessarily trust himself to be able to hear out, give advice to, and be there for Lisa because he perceives her as, you know, much more intelligent than him, which she is. But sort of what the crux of this episode gets to by the end is the fact that, you know, as a parent, there will be very difficult situations that arise that do require a lot of tact. But generally speaking, the biggest thing that you can do is be there and be like, you know, like physically affectionate and emotionally supportive of your child in order to, you know, sort of give them the self-love, you know, the underlying sense of confidence to walk through the world and make decisions that are sound of mind, which run contrary to them potentially being taken advantage of. Because when Lisa develops this crush on her teacher, he's just a normal dude, you know. He wants to help out. He ends up leaving by the end of the episode because he realizes, or not because he realizes, just because the type of person he is that he wants to go help more people and then move on to more and more people and just like spread a little bit of joy into these kids' lives around the country. He seems like a generally, you know, really solid dude, but eventually he leaves and Lisa's like feels this strong attachment to him and she's like really messed up about it. But ultimately he says, you know, I have to do this, you know, there are other people who need me. And he leaves her a note that says, you are Lisa Simpson, sort of giving her like a reminder of the pride she should take in herself, you know, just like as a talented, intelligent young lady, but also in her identity as a Simpson. You know, it was sort of like a way of subtly saying like, hey, you know, you need to be proud of and associate more with your actual family, because Homer just isn't an influential role model to her. The reason that she takes such a liking to this like older male figure that she sees as a little bit more admirable and aspirational is because she doesn't have that relationship with Homer. She doesn't see that, and therefore she sort of seeks that out from this guy, and that's where it, you know, gets really dangerous, and that's where sort of the subtext of this episode becomes very important, as, you know, a lot of people who have, you know, parental issues, specifically with their father, will seek out older male validation, and typically that will be, or at least oftentimes, that will be taken advantage of, and people get very traumatized or have extremely problematic relationships. Like just general stuff like this. It's like a really big issue. I know tons of people who have gotten into dynamics like this when they were younger. Tons of people who have like almost fallen into these traps. A lot of people who have had very similar problems. So I think it's definitely a very important issue for the episode to tackle. But ultimately, it isn't directly tackled. It's just sort of like an implication. That's like, oh, well, this could end up really bad, but thankfully it's not that complex of a situation. It's only a 20-minute episode where by the end Homer resolves both that and the B plot, and then like a little last minute C plot they throw in, all in like a minute and a half, because the idea was like all he had to do was be there in the situation. He had to be there, like, emotionally, hear her out, spend time with her. Because the entire time, not only is it really like a reflection of a sense of respect that she doesn't have for Homer, that's part of it. But I feel like the reason that lack of respect is so prominent in her mind is because she doesn't have any, like, emotionally genuine like moments with him like she does in the latter half of the episode. It's something where he just needs to be more present, and she won't be seeking these things out. She won't be looking for reasons not to like him and stuff like that. Like, I'm sure by the end of the episode she doesn't necessarily see him as much more aspirational than she did at the start, but the point is she's just in like a more generally good mood, and doesn't feel so disappointed by him. I feel like it's almost like a misguided sense of disappointment. It's like she doesn't actually want him to be competent. She just wants him to be present. So that's pretty cool. The B plot isn't like quite as interesting. Bart runs for president, and it's like stupid. It's so stupid. I made that sound like I just hated it, but like he's like the big dumb guy who everybody likes, and then there's like the smart kid who actually should be the president, and clearly the dumb guy's gonna win. But this isn't real life, so the smart guy won, and the guy who was like actually sensible ended up winning the election, because while Bart had so many fans, none of them were actually very connected to him. None of them actually really cared all that much. They were just there for like a quick good time and didn't bother to actually go out and vote, just for forgetting. It was played off pretty comedically. But the point is, Bart lost. He won the popularity contest, but he lost the election. Homer eventually comforts him by the end, saying, it probably would have been a net negative on your happiness if you were to win anyway, because then you'd have to do a bunch of boring stuff. There wouldn't actually be any perks to it. The only good thing about winning is winning, and Homer's pretty much the one who inspired him to do that anyways. But while Lisa's going through all these struggles, and she is sort of subtly venting to Marge, her mom, about it, Marge keeps trying to bring it up to Homer, and Homer does make a few somewhat genuine attempts, but he's stifled by his own lack of confidence as a father. And what he tends to resort to is just, oh, I'm just going to help Bart. Like Bart needs help right now. I'm just going to spend time with him because, Bart is a lot easier for Homer to understand. He's a little bit more like him. It's a situation that he sees as more comfortable to navigate and all that kind of stuff. But the cool thing about the Bart situation, it's like a little bit of a parallel, because there was the character that I already forgot the name of, the substitute teacher guy, and he sort of represented the idea of not, he travels around, and you get the impression that he really does genuinely just have respect for like the kids, and just like wants to help out. And his way of doing that isn't by trying to be a savior to any one person. It's just by spreading like, little instances of positivity throughout like a much greater scope. And in that sense, it's a little bit more flash in the pan with his influence, though it can still be very profound. And I think there's like a little bit of a parallel going on there with Bart and his sort of less profound influence on the people that he interacts with. Like, it's just sort of like a brief spur of the moment, flash in the pan thing where they all get super excited and they have a party under the slide, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean much to any of them, and they need stability in the classroom. They need somebody who's actually going to make sensible decisions and be consistently there for them. And that's sort of an allegory for, I guess, the A plot. with Homer and that teacher guy. The interesting thing is that teacher guy was actually pretty benevolent. I think it's like a pretty good thing. Like I know a lot of guys who have been in relationships. Hell, I've been in relationships before. This isn't actually like really so much about the episode, but this is just where my mind started like going after like thinking about these things. But a lot of girls too, actually. Actually, no, one girl right now. Okay, I'm getting like way off topic. But the point is, a lot of people try to save somebody, you know, like somebody has bad issues at home or something, and they're like, I'm going to take it upon myself to be the person who can help them. And, you know, usually it comes from a pretty empathetic place, but it's also not very sensible. You can't replace that person, and unless it's like an actual devoted relationship that has been established to be functional and mutually beneficial, like, it's not wise to try to fill that hole in a lot of ways. It can be. It's definitely very tricky, and it's pretty nuanced, and it depends on the situation a lot. But a lot of times, it's not actually going to fix anything. It's just going to lead to a lot more drama in the long term. And sort of the way I view that is like when the teacher came back, the homeroom teacher, she was like, yeah, this goober didn't do any of my lesson plan. Like he was not long-term tenable. Just like Bart wouldn't be like a long-term tenable president. This guy, like, he's a substitute teacher in like a science class. He's reading Charlotte's Web and crying and having a little talent show. You know, like it's a great, like fun moment that ends up being a positive experience because he doesn't, of course, like gravely overstep and make this episode way fucking darker. But, he's just able to have that like pleasant influence, but then move on. Because if he was her teacher forever, it probably actually would have been counterintuitive to her development, you know, as she grows up. And she needs a actual father figure in the home. Thankfully, this was able to resolve itself pretty nicely, pretty cleanly. I think it's a really good episode with a really good message. There were some cool bits of comedy in there. The Bart plot was kind of silly, and I just have a little bit of a nostalgia for this older style of Simpsons animation. I think about it a lot like I think of Family Guy, where it's like, listen, you could call it nostalgia, even though the time frame for me personally doesn't even line up. I didn't grow up with like a different animation style for these shows. I didn't really watch them when I was younger, but like I just like how much more personality the older, like rougher line art has. Like, it's just so polished now when they've rounded every corner, and it almost looks kind of uncanny. But I don't know, that's just kind of like a little extra bonus thing on the side that I enjoyed about the episode. But yeah, I wasn't like enamored by it or anything, but it was like, oh, this is a really nice, character-driven, somewhat nuanced, and ultimately wholesome little episode of The Simpsons here that I didn't know the series had in it. I've only heard of the fact that it used to be a little bit more episodic and like character driven, and then it sort of became more of a sketch comedy later on. But yeah, now I know firsthand, and it was really good. I really liked it.